Heyo, how's it going everyone? Nathan here. So a little bit ago, I actually upgraded my phone from the iPhone XS up to the brand new iPhone 13 Pro. And there's a few reasons why I want the Pro, and I'll get into those later in the video. But I've been loving this phone so far, and so after about a month of use now, I'm ready to give my honest thoughts on it. And if you're ready for that, let's get into it. So the specific model I got is the 13 Pro with 256 gigabytes of storage and in this brand new Sierra blue color. It's such like a muted kind of grayish blue, very subtle, clean at the same time, and I really like it. It comes in 3 other colors as well, graphite, gold, and silver, but blue's my favorite color, and this phone actually like pretty much matches my sweatshirt right here, and love the color of it, can't complain about it. So the first thing I want to cover is the design of this phone. So it's coming in with a height of 5.78 inches, a width of 2.82 inches, a depth of 0.30 inches, and it weighs 204 grams. So I know that this phone looks very similar to the 12 Pro, but there are 2 design differences that allow for this phone to have a slightly bigger battery. So the first one is that it is 0.01 inches thicker, which comes out to be just a few millimeters, and it also weighs about 15 grams heavier. So these 2 differences come from Apple actually putting in a larger battery inside of here, and it really shows just throughout the phone because, as I'll get later on in this video, the battery life on this has been great and they're really able to step it up from the 12. It keeps the same squared off edges as the 12 did, since a lot of people seem to really like that, me included, but one big difference is that now the camera bump is massive. The camera bump is way bigger than what it was in the 12, and that's to fit in now bigger sensors inside of there. The edges are made of stainless steel, and the back is made of this textured matte glass, and it's just really soft to the touch. It really helps with fingerprints, and it just kind of keeps the whole phone looking clean and beautiful. So this phone is rated IP68, which means that it's dust, water, and splash resistant, and you can even submerge it in water up to 6 meters for 30 minutes at a time. So if you ever spill something on it, you don't have to worry, your phone's gonna be perfectly fine. Sadly, Apple has kept up with the old Lightning port, so this thing still charges through Lightning, and there is a cable included in the box. No charging brick to keep that in mind, but it does support up to 20 watts of charging, which is, you know, slightly above average or what it used to be, but compared to other smartphones out there with like 50, 60 plus watt chargers, it doesn't charge that fast, but Apple claims that you can get 50% in just 30 minutes, which, I mean, for the average person and with how great this battery is inside, is plenty good for anyone. This phone still supports wireless charging up to 15 watts, so it's gonna be a little slower than the actual port. And there's also MagSafe inside, and I recently just got a new MagSafe car mount for like when I'm Instacarting and stuff like that. Works great. I'm actually a really big fan of MagSafe because the XS didn't have one. One of the biggest upgrades Apple made this year with the 13 Pro is with its display. So it is now rocking a Super Retina XDR display with the ProMotion technology. This is an OLED panel with 2532 by 1170 pixels, and it has a resolution of 460 pixels per inch. This display supports HDR, True Tone, has a P3 wide color palette, so the colors are super accurate in this, and it even has a 2,000,000:1 contrast ratio. This phone has a max brightness of 1000 nits and a peak brightness of 1200 nits while viewing HDR video. Basically, this translates to whenever I'm outside in the middle of the sunlight and I turn my brightness all the way up, I can see my phone perfectly fine. And there's actually a large difference I've noticed from viewing regular content to HDR content. That 1200 nits really shows itself, and it just looks super clean, and they really got that down with the brightness of this phone. Sadly, this iPhone still has the notch. Apple has yet to get rid of it. Hopefully next year will be the year. But on the bright side, that this notch is now 20% smaller overall, and it comes from like the width across the iPhone. It does go down a little more into the phone screen, just barely, but it's not any more noticeable like while you're viewing content or videos for it to be a problem. just like other iPhones, it kind of just blends into the background while you're using it. The notch is still where Apple houses the front-facing camera, the speaker grill, which was actually moved up from more so the middle to the very top of the edge, Face ID, and microphones. So probably the most important update to this display Apple made is with the new ProMotion technology. This allows for adaptive refresh rates that range from as low as 10 Hz up to 120 Hz, and it'll change based off of what you're using your phone for. So if you're just sitting there on like a website or just reading a book, it'll drop the refresh rate down so you conserve battery. But if you're swiping through a website, if you're swiping through the home screen, playing a game, it'll crank that up to 120 Hz and it looks buttery smooth. And I know many other like Android phones out there have had 120 Hz for years now. I'm on the Apple bandwagon and I know I've been missing out, but it's finally here and it looks amazing. I do want to put out there though, going from the XS to the 13 Pro, so from 60 Hz to 120, I didn't really notice that big of a difference, maybe a tiny bit while swiping through, but you can actually go into your accessibility settings and you can turn off this adaptive refresh rate, and so it'll sit at 60 Hz flat. And I actually tried that today for the first time after using this for a month. And so switching from 120 back to 60, I noticed it instantly. I noticed it so much. And so going from an older one to a newer one, it's gonna be a nice little improvement, nothing major. But if you go backwards, it's night and day, and I'm so glad I have the 120 now. So this iPhone also got their newest processor. Sadly, it's not part of Apple's own silicon, but it is now rocking the A15 Bionic chip, and it has a 6-core CPU. 2 of these cores are for performance, and the other 4 are efficiency cores, and this really does show pretty much anything that you throw at it, any heavy games, anything else that you could be doing, photo editing, this phone's gonna handle it like a champ. And with those 4 efficiency cores, it also helps just give it that great battery life that it now has. So now moving over to probably the biggest physical change to this phone from last year, and that's the camera system. So this phone is still rocking the same 3 cameras with LiDAR and a flash on the back. The 3 cameras on the back are a primary, an ultra-wide, and a telephoto. They all are now 12 megapixels. The primary has an aperture of f1.5. The ultra-wide has an aperture of 1.8 with 120 degrees, and the telephoto has an aperture of f2.8 with 3 times zoom, but you can get a digital zoom of up to 15 times with this phone. The larger 12 megapixel sensors throughout all 3 of these cameras allow for more bokeh, or that blur in the background of your photos, more often in different scenarios than without it. This natural blur effect looks better than Apple's portrait mode, as the portrait mode is software generated and can kind of spew onto the subject in focus sometimes, or it just won't look quite right. But with these new larger sensors, it kind of nails that down better, and it just makes your photos look a little more cinematic and professional as opposed to the previous year. So one of the biggest software changes to these cameras is with the new Photographic Styles in the camera settings. So to get to these Photographic Styles, up at the top right in the camera app is going to be a little icon with 3 planes in it, and you press on that, and you can swipe through the 5 different options. You can choose between standard, rich contrast, vibrant, warm, and cool, and whichever one you like, you can even tune it more down in the settings below of it. And what this will do is it'll kind of bake it into any photo you take, so you don't have to go to it every single time and change it. You can change it whenever you want, but it'll just kind of be like a default picture profile that'll be baked into the photos. And I really do like the rich contrast one. It kind of just makes my photos pop a little more. So that's the one that I stick with, but I can definitely see myself using the other ones in different scenarios. So now moving over to the ultra-wide camera, I'm a big fan of this one, as I just never had an ultra-wide before in the XS. All that had was the primary and a telephoto. But just being able to switch to it and get a whole lot more perspective of whatever you're focusing on or you're trying to get a picture of, I really like the field of view of 120 degrees, and I've already been able to get some really cool shots and videos with it. And another thing is for vlogging, if you just don't have your camera with you and you're a vlogger, this ultra wide just kind of gives you that feel of like a vlogging phone. So I've used it a few times and I really like how it looks, and so I do definitely plan on using this more. So one other feature that comes off of this camera is also the macro photos you can take with it. So as soon as you start like getting really close to something with your phone, the camera will sense that and it'll actually switch to a macro mode, and it's able to focus in on anything up to about an inch away. But this is way closer than like what you were able to get with before, and I've already been able to get some really cool shots filming just some products that I'm reviewing or just anything else up really close. Again, it's not perfect, it's not as crystal clear as the other cameras, but it's really impressive what you can get with it. So next is the Telephoto Camera, which has up to a 3x optical zoom, but you can get a digital zoom up to 15 times, which I really don't recommend. As soon as you get past that 3x and it's starting to like process your zoom, it gets very grainy, very ugly fast. But if you need to take those far away photos, you can do it. But just for like the average day person, the 3x zoom should be plenty enough. And if it's not, you can always try to get closer to your subject or whatever you need to. But the telephoto is just like a nice addition to have as well. And then taking photos at night or in dark scenarios, it turns out really well, especially compared to the 10S. That just didn't have like any sort of settings or anything to help it with those kind of shots. But when it's dark, it'll actually recognize it and it'll slow its shutter down to let a lot more light in. And some of the photos I've gotten are actually like really good, like relative to like what this camera is and the size. And so I'm glad that I can actually rely on my phone now to at least take half decent shots in darker settings and areas. The videos on the 13 Pro are also phenomenal. You can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p all the way up to 240 frames per second, and 720 at 30 frames per second. The videos are super crispy and clear, and honestly like one of the best camera systems in a phone today. So another exclusive with the 13 Pro is now ProRes filming, and you can get up to 4K 30 frames per second. So you can only do the 4K if you have a storage capacity of 256 gigabytes or greater. But if you have the base model 128 gigabyte version, then you're limited to ProRes at 1080p at 30 frames per second. And I think that they just do this to help you like not fill up your storage, because ProRes 4K will chug through your storage. It says like in the Apple settings itself that about 1 minute of filming at 4K ProRes will take up about 6 gigabytes of your storage, and that is just crazy. So I personally don't film on ProRes. I'm sure more professional users out there would love to. So if you plan on shooting with that, I definitely recommend maybe not even the 256, maybe the base 512 version, but you need a lot of storage to film with that. And then probably the last big new feature to the camera system in this is the new cinematic mode. So the cinematic mode is basically portrait mode, but with video. So it'll produce this software generated blurry background around the subject of focus. And what's really cool is Apple's AI, where they're able to track someone's face, and if someone turns their head away from the camera, then it'll switch the focus from that person to another one. It's very cool technology, it's very cool to see, but how practical is it? I don't know. It's not that great. You can see the blur around some of the focused objects, as it's very similar to portrait mode, but I can definitely see people shooting some really cool scenes with this, or just some really cool videos to kind of give it a new taste. So just to quickly go over the front-facing camera, it's the same as last year and didn't get an upgrade at all. So it takes very good selfies, I think. Just it doesn't compare to the cameras on the back. But if you're in a pinch and you need a selfie, Snapchat, whatever, like it's perfectly fine and it does look very good. So the last big change with the new iPhones are the battery lives. And so I know I've mentioned it a few times in this video already, but this thing has been very great for me, especially coming from a 3-year-old phone that would just lose about 60% battery by noontime. This thing has been chugging along and I can easily get a whole day's worth of battery out of it. So Apple has never been a company to post the battery capacity of their products on their website. I don't know why, so I can't give you an exact number, but there are 3 main reasons why this battery has been so great for me. So the first reason is just the overall thickness and weight increase of the phone. It being a little bit thicker and heavier allowed for Apple to put in a battery into the phone, and I really don't have a problem with this. Like, it's not overly heavy, like it is still extremely thin, fits in your pocket very comfortably, and I will take the extra battery capacity over that any day of the week. So the next reason is Apple's A15 Bionic processor with the 4 efficiency cores, and it's just a really efficient chip and it really shows throughout the battery. And so just any task that you're doing on it, it will do it more efficiently, and therefore you just end up having a longer battery throughout the day. And then the final reason is Apple's ProMotion technology in the display. Having it be able to change its refresh rate from anywhere from 10 hertz all the way up to 120, instead of it just maintaining a constant 60, those refresh rate drops when you're not needing it, when you're on a still page or you're just reading something, really does preserve the battery of this phone. And so it's not just kind of wasting unnecessary battery where it doesn't need to. And then as soon as you need it to, it'll kick those refresh rates up and it just looks buttery smooth. And so with those three factors, this is like a king of battery. Apple claims this phone to have 22 hours of video playback, and I could easily see myself going an entire day without needing to charge it. Even though I do just regularly charge it while I'm just sitting in my room, I've never had a problem with it needing to be charged. So with this being Apple's flagship smartphone, you know Apple, like you gotta pay to play. So this is not cheap at all. The base model 128 gigabytes, which is like iffy, like yeah, that's probably enough for most people. That starts at $999, and then you can completely max it out to be easily $1,600. And I would just recommend getting the 256 over the 128, especially if you're shooting a lot of video for it. I personally went with the 13 Pro for a couple reasons. The first one being that macro photo. Me now reviewing products, I really needed something to kind of get really close in on detail of things. And so this is just gonna help bring me some ease whenever I need it. That, the camera system, just me now filming more videos, I wanted just like the best camera I could have had. And lastly, I really wanted that 120 hertz refresh rate. I want to future-proof myself, as whatever phone I did get would have probably been my next phone for the next 3 years or so. And I just know my luck. I could see Apple putting in 120 hertz on the 14 and the 14 Pro next year, as well as probably even getting rid of the notch. So I just wanted the best one I could have gotten now for those reasons, and I am super happy. I love the color. It's a beautiful device. It's gorgeous. And I don't know, I love Apple products. And so that's gonna be my review of the iPhone 13 Pro. So if you learned something new or if you enjoyed the video, then please don't forget to like the video down below and subscribe, as I don't want to miss anything else I have in the future. And with that being said, have a great day everyone, and cheers.